Buck Sexton here. Thank you very much for joining me today. Great to be with you on the EIB. And it's also fun when you're on a Friday and you get some very interesting, very juicy breaking news. No doubt many of you already know that John Boehner, Speaker of the House, has announced today that he is done. Not just done in leadership, but done with Congress. He is going to be retiring his seat, giving up his seat, resigning, and also retiring, one would assume, from politics. He's bailing out. Now, many are saying that this is under pressure. There are some efforts out there, and you can see them if you do a quick scan of various news items and news stories. There are some out there who are saying, oh, well, this was a long time in coming. I mean, this is Boehner, obviously. He planned this. This is just a good time for him to make the exit. Others say that this was a little more rushed in feel. Boehner had to hit the eject button and get out of the building. Well, it seemed like he could still avoid the worst of the pressure building among the conservatives in the Congress. There was a crowd at the Values Voter Summit when this was announced by, I believe it was Marco Rubio. They broke out into what could accurately be described as jubilation. They're very excited about this. So obviously, there are many people who are quite enthusiastic about the idea of Boehner no longer being at the top of the Republican Congress. There will be some weeping and gnashing of teeth, and I'm not just talking about from Boehner himself. There'll be some people who are upset by this, and we'll have to see what really shakes out as a result of it. We'll have to see. And I don't just mean lobbyists either, and others who are very much a part of the Beltway GOP machinery, because people are now doing the after-action report, if you will, of the Boehner era as Speaker, and we're already seeing this turn out in various pundits and analysts and talking heads weighing in on why is it that Boehner's leaving not just now, but also what is the legacy that this man leaves behind? Part of that, though, is still to be written, because as we know, there is this looming fight over a government shutdown and the possible defunding of Planned Parenthood. Now, if you were thinking about this to be a time for Boehner to stand on principle and all of a sudden show a bit more moxie, a little more chutzpah, decide that, hey, no longer do I have to go along to get along, so why don't I make a big exit here and at least do what I can to try to defund Planned Parenthood, which obviously gets all of this attention right now. It has been getting attention because of the deplorable, horrifying, nightmare-inducing series of videos that have been released by the group, the Center for Medical Progress. We've seen those over recent months, and that's why the conservative base, not just the conservatives in the Congress, the conservative base across the country, which is a thing, which it seems like at some point John Boehner forgot about. Or maybe he didn't forget, and that's why he was tearing up. But they want Planned Parenthood defunded. But John Boehner, it seems, has already indicated that that's not going to happen. There will be a clean funding bill. This is interesting also because there's the story out there already, you'll see this, that Boehner stepping down in part because he was so moved by the Pope. Now, this is a man who obviously is, relatively speaking, easily moved to tears and moved to a degree of emotion. But I also think there's some tragic irony here in an individual who says that he feels called to step down because of the Pope's visit and that this is an appropriate time. And then his last major act as an elected, very powerful political figure is going to be to make sure that Planned Parenthood continues to be funded by the taxpayer. That's really his last. As a Catholic, this is going to be something that you'd want going forward. He believes that this is the way to do it, that he wants to be part of his legacy. It's kind of astonishing, isn't it? It's It's kind of astonishing. Boehner could put that out there and see no dissonance between saying, well, as a Catholic, the Pope's visit feels like the appropriate time for me to bow out. And now with the looming possibility of a government shutdown ahead of us, we have to see this and say, Boehner's last act is going to be yet one more, it looks like, at least, hasn't happened yet, we will have to see, but yet one more betrayal of conservative principles, yet one more betrayal of basic human decency and morality from a leader who seemed to think that the very purpose of his position was not to stand for principles, was not to represent the people who sent him there, or even the ideals of the party versus the machinery, the apparatus of the party. Somebody doesn't believe that that's his purpose, that he's there really just to make sure that the machinery of the Beltway is lubricated. I mean, why does he think that his position exists? And this raises now the question that has been on many minds across the country for quite some time. Why does the Republican Party exist anymore? What is its purpose if it's not going to oppose the destructive agenda of the left? Why does it even pretend that it's not just a series of transactions, that it doesn't view governance as just an excuse for transactional activity? You do for me, I do for you. Nothing really more than that. I think you could make the case increasingly that's what the Republican Party feels like. And certainly after the total abdication of principle that came from John Boehner after the midterm election with the funding of Obama's government right away. If you want, just as I'm not sure if this would be amusing for you or if you'd want to pull your hair out and throw things at the wall, but go back and look at some of the ads that Republicans were running in order to get either elected or reelected in this last midterm. Oh, a lot of staunch conservatives, very clear, very full-throated on securing the borders, absolutely standing on the tallest soapbox they could find to oppose Obamacare. And then what happened? Fully fund the government, business as usual. You could practically hear the roulette wheels turning up around Capitol Hill. The taxpayer-funded casino was open for business, and Boehner was excited to be one of the dealers. That's what it felt like to many, and that's why there's so much anger. You have people that are paying a bit more attention now to conservative or to GOP politics, I should say. A bit more attention to it, and they're saying, well, what is this rise of not just Trump, but these other outsiders as well, non-politicians? Well, to everybody who's inside the party or who's paying close enough attention to what's been happening, the answer is quite obvious. The answer is that betrayal of the base is not a good political strategy. And betrayal of the base must have consequences, or else what does the base exist for? You'll notice that Democrats don't cross the base. You'll notice that there aren't a whole lot of Democrats lining up to stand on principle against Planned Parenthood's taxpayer funding. This isn't even banning Planned Parenthood. It's just saying the taxpayer who has his or her funds taken by threat of force isn't going to be forced to pay for this. Not a lot of Democrats, though, are standing against the abortion lobby. That's not how they do things. They recognize that to be members in good standing, they better pay attention to that base. And they do. The consequences of Boehnerism are out there for all of us to see. No worthwhile opposition to what President Obama has accomplished, because from his perspective, from a progressive worldview, he's accomplished quite a great deal. He said he would transform the country in a matter of just about 6 years now. He's been doing quite well at that goal. The country does feel very different in many ways. You'll also notice these scorched earth politics that the Democrats are willing to pay to get through Obamacare, to change the law or ignore the law in the case of immigration, and countless other infractions, to pack the courts, to get rid of previous impediments to their leftist court indoctrination process that they've gone through, which, by the way, is going to stay with us for quite some time. The federal courts, President Obama, this is a brilliant strategy, but this is how they play the game. Lots of federal judges with very long time left on the bench now. Lots of time left on the bench. They are going to be with us, and they're going to be protecting the Obama agenda no matter who gets elected in this next presidential election. So that's what we're facing now. So why did Boehner step down? I think the more important point is, why did it take so long? At least that's where I would go with it. 800-282-2882. This is Buck Sexton in for Rush Limbaugh. I'll be back with a lot more in just a second. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh today on the EIB. Thank you for joining. Number here on Open Line Friday, of course, is 800-282-2882. Since we had a little chat just before about Boehner resigning at the end of October. Of course, his last act is to further annoy the very conservatives that put him in office in the first place. But now I want to talk less about the intramural fights within the GOP and a little bit about the other side, because that's going to be fun. Politico piece from yesterday, Hillary's FBI nightmare. Ooh, this already sounds like fun. I think we should talk about Madame Secretary for a moment, shall we? As you know at this point, there's the Hillary email server. It was in a closet in Colorado. She set up this whole thing. And the FBI's looking into, well, what's still on the server. And it seems from the most recent reports, of course, this is all sort of subject to change, the FBI, through its forensic digital recovery techniques, will in fact be able to pull a fair amount of those emails, if not all of the emails, the so-called personal emails that Secretary Clinton had on that server. People are realizing now that this is a very big problem. The big question, though, is even if the feds can get access to the emails from Hillary's server, will those emails be shared? Can we trust the bureaucracy? Can we trust that fourth branch of government, that is the sort of federal apparatus, to let us know what's going on here? See, the risk to Hillary, and this is a very important point of distinction, and I can tell you, as somebody who held for a number of years a top secret clearance, I understand the risks that Hillary posed by having this private server and with the information on there. The whole marked classified thing is a dodge in principle. It's a dodge when it comes to the national security of this country. That doesn't hold water. That doesn't stand up. But if you're a Clinton, you are, if not above the law, subject to a separate set of laws, which is really just the same thing, isn't it? That'll be enough to keep her out of the federal prosecutorial circuit, I think. That much is clear. There's no way they're bringing charges against Hillary for classified. But this is the important point, and this is why this piece entitled Hillary's FBI Nightmare is true. Remember what the purpose of Hillary's private little homebrew server was all about. It wasn't actually to sell nuclear secrets to the Chinese. It wasn't so that she could be super lazy and endanger national security by sending around communications that should have been on classified only systems, although that clearly was happening. That wasn't the purpose, right? We're just going to what the purpose of this was for a second. And I know that we have the NSA head just saying yesterday that her server would have been a top priority for foreign intelligence collection. So that's a very real risk. But I'm telling you, risks in terms of how the Clintons think, not risks to our national security, because they don't care about that. That's not the problem. This is the problem for Hillary. Corruption. Not classified, corruption. You see, she wasn't trying to hide national security information. She was trying to hide embarrassing information. The purpose of the server wasn't to give her an end run on classification issues, although that, of course, was an inevitable side effect of it. It's that she was trying to hide really embarrassing Clinton cronyism, all the double dealing, all the stuff she was doing that a normal person would know right away without any special government ethics training. Oh, yes. A normal person would know was suspect at best and criminal at worst. But that was what it was meant to hide. And that's the threat to her campaign. What do the Clintons care about? Power and money. What's the threat to the power and money of the Clinton dynasty at this point in time? The revelation that could come from these emails, should the FBI share them. They will access them. That much seems to be clear based on everything we've been told in the last day or so. And if they couldn't access them, that in itself would probably be the most damning situation, because then we would know that she went to an extreme length to try to not just erase data on a server, but to overwrite it so that it was unrecoverable. I mean, that's just a step away from saying, yes, I decided to put my server in an acid bath for no reason, and then take a hatchet to it. Right, exactly. Someone who does that probably has something to hide. But the focus here has to be on what Hillary has to hide and what she really cares about. power, the nomination, the presidency, the dynasty, and money, of course. The money that was flowing into the Clinton Foundation, the global corporation that is the Clinton Foundation's coffers. And that money was flowing regularly and fast because she had tremendous access and tremendous influence to peddle, which is what was going on. But now we have to figure out if the fourth branch of government is really going to tell us what's in there. The State Department certainly doesn't want us to know. The unofficial motto, I should say, there is that presidents come and go, but the department is forever. So the State Department's not going to be particularly excited about the idea of showing us what kind of little home business was being run out of the Secretary of State's office. Remember, bureaucracies, first and foremost, they protect the bureaucracy. They're like Skynet from Terminator. They are self-aware. They don't care about anything else. True of every federal bureaucracy, really. First and foremost, the bureaucracy above all else. And then we find out just a little smattering, just the beginning, a snippet, if you will, a little taste, perhaps, of emails to come, with Hillary saying that she wasn't involved in the Huma Abedin employment decision-making process, right? Because here's how it works. And for those of you like me who have actually worked in the federal government, you just find this whole thing amazing and terrible at the same time. She was able to get jobs, private sector jobs, while maintaining a very high-level State Department sort of senior aide position, get paid by both, which usually would make you run afoul of all kinds of ethics regulations. By the way, some of those ethics regulations, when you look at them, are in fact criminal statutes. Depends on the specific matter we're talking about. But ethics can be a very serious thing, even without what would be called the sort of bright red line violation. Right? So this also then goes to the idea that we no longer are in a system or in a country where quid pro quo corruption is necessary for a criminal conviction. The appearance itself of corruption can be enough. But that's why Hillary said 3 weeks ago she wasn't involved in the Huma decision. Now we found out, oh, yeah, actually, that's right. She signed off on it. Oh, my gosh, who knew? She signed off on the decision herself. Oh, but they're telling us that it was only a part of it and she wasn't directly involved. Who really believes that for 1 second? Who thinks that that's true? You know that old line about how one death is a tragedy, but a million deaths is a statistic? That's sort of the Clinton approach to corruption. They don't violate ethics once. They don't do it discreetly. They do it all the time. They obliterate ethics as a concept. So it's all the same. You see, you can't tell the difference between Clinton business and government business, just like with the server. It was all mixed in together because to them, it's all the same. Ethics violation. They don't even know what that means. And they keep telling us that it was within the rules or it was permitted. We find out Hillary said a few weeks ago that she wasn't involved. Now she is involved, just like with the server. Lies, 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 more lies. The problem with the Clintons is that when you have no integrity to protect, there's a lot of stuff you think you can get away with. The Clinton camp keeps saying that it was within the rules or it was permitted. But you see, that's the point. In this instance, Hillary, as Secretary of State, as Sex State, as we called her on the inside, she makes the rules. She can give ethics waivers. Well, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that a lucky coincidence for Huma and whoever else? And the more we find out, by the way, the more we see here that there were others involved, too, in all sorts of transactional activity, right? Going back to everything going on here with even with Boehner on the GOP side of things. Government for sale. See, a little Clinton Foundation donation, and all of a sudden there are people in the State Department talking about how somebody might get this position or that job. Oh, this is shocking to absolutely no one, but this is what Hillary was trying to hide. Buck Sexton here in for Rush. Thank you for joining. Thank you for staying with me. We are at Open Line Friday, of course, 800-282-2882. Also, for those of you who are digitally inclined, you can send me tweets at Buck Sexton or go to Facebook.com/Buck Sexton. You can send me messages. Please follow the page. More on me at theblaze.com, where I am a national security editor and a host. Check out theblaze.com. First, let's go to, we have Patrick in St. Lucie, Florida. Patrick, you're on the Rush Limbaugh program. You're speaking to Buck.
Thank you, Buck. Nice talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
I enjoyed your analogy about the Skynet and during your last segment.
Terminator references are always a good idea. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me start with now that Boehner's gone, the bigger question is who do we replace him with? And are they going to have the courage to stand up to the Obama administration?
Well, Obama at this point doesn't really care. And it's interesting to see people recognizing that part of this all is Boehner's fault. But if you're not willing to use the power of the purse, what power does Congress even have at this point? Really? I mean, what power does Congress have that an executive can't actually or hasn't actually been able to seize at this point? Obama writes laws. Obama disregards laws. He is able to find all these ways to sort of usurp legislative prerogative. So how important is the Congress is sort of a separate standalone question. And in some ways, I think Boehner has shown the increased impotence of Congress unless you're willing to actually go to the mat with, for example, a government shutdown. But I know they want Kevin McCarthy of California is the one that's being talked about a lot. Paul Ryan has already, as I understand, have been like, nah, sorry, not me. no interest, guys, which I can understand why he doesn't want that. Doesn't want that on his shoulders. We'll have to see. The only reason Kevin McCarthy, of course, is next in line is because Eric Cantor had his shocking defeat in Virginia. So we'll see. I'm not convinced, Patrick, that there's going to be this great awakening of this flourishing of conservative principle in the Republican Congress. Now we'll have to see.
No, that's one of the things I also want to point out was even though we have a presidential election coming, taking of the Senate, that election is going to be very important. And, the voices like Trey Gowdy and those are others need to step up and continue to fight.
Absolutely. Look, those who want change who want conservative change inside of the Congress can't now say, well, with Boehner gone, I got a question for you. What's going to happen to Mitch McConnell? Why are we stopping at Boehner? Well, we think this is some great victory. I mean, I think that you're gonna see a lot of interesting infighting going on, obviously, but it also just sort of shows you the trajectory, I think, of the GOP right now, which is that there are going to be people that want a lot to happen, and unless they keep the pressure on, nothing is going to happen. But Patrick from Florida, thank you very much for calling in. Let's take Joseph, who is calling in from, I think, California.
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm calling from Cherry Valley, California.
Thank you for calling in, Joseph. What's on your mind?
Okay, I just wanted to, I would like to say good morning to you, first of all. It's morning out here.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say the House Speaker, Boehner, him leaving and making this final move, as in fully funding Planned Parenthood, is just him showing the American conservative voter, basically stabbing us in the back before he makes his way out the door. And I think that's his main reason for announcing that he's going to be resigning.
Right. I mean, you see, here's what I should say I don't get. Here's what I find inexcusable is a better way to put it, Joseph. You've got a guy in Boehner who's saying that the Pope's visit, right? The Pope, who, by the way, the Catholic Church, and we'll get into this a little later on in the show, but the Catholic Church is still very adamantly opposed to abortion, for example, irrespective of what the Pope sort of waxes philosophical on when it comes to climate change. Right. And you have Boehner who's saying that the Pope sort of touched him and the Pope has moved him, so to speak, with his visit to step aside now. And so Boehner's next move is going to be to make sure Planned Parenthood is funded. Usually Boehner could get away with the whole, I'm a tactician. I'm moving and shaking inside the Beltway. I'm doing the dance I got to do to get the best outcome we can for conservatism. Now, I know a lot of you hear that and you'd laugh, right? But that's what he would say. In this instance, I mean, Joseph, explain, tell me what you think. I hear this and I say, okay, now he's released of all the constraints of having to sort of do the dance and win, so to speak, in politics. He can just do what's right, and his last act is going to be this? I mean, this is almost pathological. What's this guy's problem?
It's him just spitting in the face of the conservative American voter. I'm a Latino conservative voter from Southern California, and, just to see him do this, especially after seeing the Pope, I believe that he's just using the Pope as an excuse for him to, say, I'm leaving because of this and that. But in all reality, his last move is to stick a dagger into the back of his face. And that right there basically tells the true story to anyone who's actually paying attention.
Yeah, Joseph, I look, I don't know how you can say that you're leaving because of the Pope's visit and then you do something that would horrify the Pope, quite honestly. But Joseph from Cherry Valley, California, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for calling in. We've got Jimmy in Spring, Texas. Jimmy, you're on the Rush Limbaugh Show. You're speaking to Buck Sexton.
Hello, Buck. Buck,
hey.
Everyone's asking the who question, as in who's going to replace Boehner, but I'd like to throw a different question. That's the why question. And I believe that in the House of Cards, Game of Thrones, large chess match being played, that this is coming from the RNC, who is saying, look, we've got revolt out there amongst the base. You know, 3 of our top 5 candidates polling right now are all outsiders because they're upset. And so we're going to take out Boehner, and we're going to replace him. Don't know who, don't know why, don't care about that, but we're going to replace Boehner, all because of what I like to now term the FOT theory, fear of Trump.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So
you think that this is a sacrificial lamb? Look, there's certainly pressure coming from all over the place, and it's not just pressure from conservatives inside of Congress. There's pressure, generally speaking, within the sort of conservative ecosystem across the country. But also, you're right. The rise of the GOP outsiders right now is a very real. It's a phenomenon that you can't you can't miss. It's just there. It's in front of your face. You look at the polls. You got Trump, Carson, Fiorina. What do they all have in common? Gee, I don't know. And I think that a sacrificial lamb idea, which I think is what you're saying here, which is that Boehner had to go to sort of take the heat off the rest of the establishment, because the establishment is a little worried right now. I think that that's true. Now, maybe they figure that in the long run, you know, the machinery will outrun the attention span and the energizing, if you will, of the conservatives. But I don't think that necessarily that's going to be the case, and so they're having to pay close attention to this. So maybe it is the case that there was some extra pressure put on Boehner's shoulders, because they realize that he's become a real manifestation of what, you know, look, it's become a rallying cry unto itself. People say, why is Trump so popular, or why is Carson, or why is Fiorina, or you name it? And they say, well, look at Boehner and McConnell. Boehner and McConnell. People are more angry at Boehner and McConnell than they are a lot of the Democrats, because when your friends and allies betray you, that hurts even more.
Hey, Buck.
Yes, Jimmy.
I'd also like to tell you a quick story. Several weeks ago, I had the opportunity exiting a plane, actually, in D.C., and my congressman, Texas 8, Kevin Brady, was exiting the plane as well, and I got my 30 seconds of fame with him as we planed. And I said very professionally, very respectfully, that I would, as a constituent of his, like him to support Louis Gohmert in the next speaker election. And if you could have seen the look on his face and his response, it was classic. It was, oh, I don't know about that. We need someone. Did he
give you the Hillary email shrug? I don't know. Did you do one of those? Thanks for calling in, Jimmy. I'm not surprised by that at all, by the way. I'm not surprised in the least that you would have had that reaction to that suggestion. All right, 800-282-2882. This is Buck Sexton of The Blaze in for Rush. You can send me tweets at Buck Sexton or go to facebook.com/Buck Sexton. Consider that a sort of extension of the ways we can continue the conversation today. I'll be back in just a minute. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh today. Thank you very much for joining me on the EIB. We're talking a bit about Boehner and a little bit about Hillary, which I'd like to do some more of, actually. I just think that it's interesting that you see so much false media confusion, sort of pretend confusion over why anybody would care about the special government employee status of Huma Abedin or any of these sort of these machinations behind the scenes, the inner workings of the Clinton enterprise, which encompassed the office of the Secretary of State, the most powerful diplomat in the United States government and one of the most powerful posts in government. And if you were looking to sell influence, other than being the president, could you think of a better place to be? Because there's a lot of rich, corrupt foreigners all over the world that love to make a charitable donation in exchange for a little extra attention, shall we say. I would just point out to you that on the other side of this, or you hear the media saying on this, oh, why are Republicans? This is like overreach. This is every time something bad happens to a Democrat and the media has to talk about it, it immediately turns into overreach. That's what you hear. Oh, this is overreach. Meanwhile, if you were to step across the other side of the aisle and look at how they play ball, Does anybody notice little patterns happened over the last, 12, 18 months or so, where you have various Republican politicians, some who are considered, and in fact, in some cases, still in the race for the Republican nomination for president, but people who had been talked about as possible presidential contenders. And in fact, what we see with them is that they were brought up on some sort of either charge or at least investigated, which if you're a politician is almost as bad as having the charges brought, for completely Looney Tunes ridiculous stuff. I mean, total baloney criminal probes. They did one against Scott Walker in Wisconsin for what? Collusion, which is a fancy Democrat term for the First Amendment, apparently. They also did it against Chris Christie for Bridgegate. I mean, they actually did a federal investigation of a traffic slowdown in New Jersey. Let that settle for a second. Traffic slowdowns in New Jersey. I mean, what's next? An investigation into snow in Alaska? Well, I mean, no, climate change. If it snows, it's climate change. If it doesn't, it's climate change. It doesn't really matter, I guess. They even tried to go after Rick Perry criminally. They went after Bob McDonnell and got a conviction, which I know McDonnell is fighting. They've gone after all these Republican politicians on the flimsiest pretext. And people say, oh, look at McDonnell. Oh, really? You're right. You know, McDonnell just made a strategic error here because instead of getting gifts or whatever he got based on the indictment, he should have just said that his wife gives amazing speeches. And any businessman in the state of Virginia who wanted to get a little extra attention could just pay his wife, I don't know, $250,000 for a speech. That's a good way to make friends. But her speeches are amazing. Her speeches are so eloquent, right? Just like Bill Clinton's speeches. What are they worth, $750K? How many speeches do you know that are worth close to $1 million for 45 minutes of, hey, I'm just amazing. I just want to travel the globe and talk to all the wonderful ladies of the world and make sure they feel loved and warm and hugged. I mean, maybe that's worth $750,000 to you, but I doubt it. I very, very much doubt it. I think that people should see this for what it is. There's a little bit of Bill. He likes to talk like this. He's, hey, ladies. So I'm just saying that there's the way that the Democrats play ball, the ways the Republicans play ball, and the media is all, oh, Hillary, not marked, classified. I mean, they are doing backflips to make this seem like not a big deal. Meanwhile, what, Rick Perry was considering pulling back funding for an office that had a prosecutor who had a DUI on the record, if memory serves. I'm just going off of the top of my head here. And somebody wanted to open a criminal probe. I mean, Scott Walker, they're going after him for years. They locked up. For those of you who think that this Abbott thing and Cheryl Mills and Hillary Clinton doesn't matter, just remember that if you're not in the corridors of power, if you don't matter to the federal machinery, if you're not part of the Democrat progressive team, if the left doesn't want to give you lots of high fives, guess what? You could be a low-level government employee like one in Wisconsin who was tied to Scott Walker and his campaign, who was handed a criminal conviction. In fact, they threatened her with a federal criminal conviction for using her personal phone inside a government building on government time. That's for the rest of people who work in government. That's the sort of totalitarian big brother nonsense that you have to worry about all the time. You know, you don't get a warning. You know, if they decide to go after you, if you violate the Hatch Act, I know this is first date talk, the Hatch Act, right? If you violate the Hatch Act, all of a sudden people want your scalp. But if you're a Clinton, oh no, then you can sell the office of the Secretary of State to the highest bidder, but do it through an intermediary, do it through an organization that you're still running while you're in office, and you have employees of the State Department who are helping you run it. If the FBI shares those emails, and they're there, the emails about how Clinton ran this foundation, if the FBI goes forward and shares those emails, Joe Biden better be warming up in the bullpens, all I can tell you. And I know we're already hearing those rumors. But Joe Biden, I mean, they're going to put a helmet on him and send him into the game without even knowing the play. It's not going to matter. They're going to have no choice. They will have absolutely no choice but to withdraw Hillary. But maybe it's not even going to get to that point. I see Bernie Sanders here. Oh, this is a fun little poll. CNN WMUR poll says Bernie Sanders has opened up a 16-point lead over Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. An open socialist, by the way. These are interesting times we live in, aren't they? I remember when using the term socialist was a terrible slur for a Democrat presidential nominee, or a Democrat president for that matter. To call someone a socialist was to make sure that you weren't going to be invited to the fancy Vanity Fair cocktail party. You were on the bad boy list. Now, we got a guy who's, he likes to be a socialist. He's the middle class and Wall Street fat cats are stealing from the middle class. They're taking everything from them. And, it's about time we raise wages by raising taxes and we redistribute the wealth. It's worked amazingly. Look at the Soviet Union. A few mistakes, yes, but overall, not a bad idea. I mean, that's one way to go. It's one way to go. 800-282-2882 here on Open Line Friday. Buck Sexton in for Rush Limbaugh. We'll be back in just a minute. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh today on the EIB. More on me at theblaze.com/Buck Sexton. Please go check it out. Also, facebook.com/Buck Sexton. All right, so I just wanted to point out that Hillary's having a rough time. You could say she's at a spot of difficulty. It's getting hard for Madam Secretary's campaign, as you know, with Bernie Sanders doing very well. And it cannot be, in my opinion, repeated too often that while we're also focused on the fighting within the GOP, as I said, you've got a sort of a kooky socialist who's doing quite well among Democrats and who's gaining a lot of enthusiasm and gaining a lot of traction over time. So I think that we should spend a bit more on that, a little less of the food fight from within the GOP. I know people are telling me, and this is from the tweets and what I'm seeing on Facebook, they're letting me know that McCarthy's going to replace Boehner. That's a fair point to make here. How much better is that really going to be? I don't know. Remains to be seen. And then there's the even more macro level question of if we had the best Speaker of the House imaginable, unless you have the presidency, can you really accomplish the entirety of the agenda? And the best you can do is oppose the agenda, right? We'll have to see. Much more coming up. I'll be back.